Try to remember the day you learned to walk. You can't. Try to remember your first birthday. The cake, the candle, the faces around you. Nothing. You have no memory of the first 2 or 3 years of your life. Not one clear image, not one voice. And yet, those were some of the most important years you will ever live through. Your brain was growing faster than it ever will again. You were learning language, faces, danger, love. So why did none of it stick? For over a century, scientists have called this infantile amnesia. Sigmund Freud was the first to name it, back in the early 1900s. He had a theory. He believed the memories were still there, buried, hidden away because they were too disturbing for the conscious mind to hold on to. Freud thought you were repressing your own beginning. He was wrong, but he was wrong in a way that took nearly 100 years to fully understand. Here is what actually happens. Your brain is not deleting these memories. It never had the equipment to store them in the first place. Picture your brain as a house being built. Before you can move furniture in, you need walls. You need a foundation. In your first years of life, a structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus is still under construction. The hippocampus is the part of your brain responsible for stitching moments into long-term memories you can consciously recall later. Without a finished hippocampus, experiences pass through you like water through open hands. You were there. You just weren't recording. So when did the recording start? This is where the science gets strange. In the 1980s, a psychologist named Rovee-Collier ran an experiment that changed everything researchers thought they knew about infant memory. She placed babies, some only 2 or 3 months old, in cribs with a colorful mobile hanging above them. She tied a ribbon from the mobile to the baby's ankle. Every time the baby kicked, the mobile moved. Within minutes, the babies figured it out. They kicked harder and faster, delighted that they controlled the world above them. Then she waited. A day? A week? Sometimes longer. When she brought the same babies back and hung the same mobile without tying the ribbon, something remarkable happened. The babies kicked. They remembered. Not with words, not with images they could describe, but with their bodies. Their muscles held onto something their conscious minds never would. This told researchers something enormous. Babies can form memories almost from birth. The memories are real. They are just a different kind of memory. Not the kind you can talk about. The kind you can only feel. Which means the real mystery was never why babies can't remember. The real mystery is why the memories that do form never survive into adulthood. Decades later, a developmental psychologist named Patricia Bauer picked up where Rovee-Collier left off. Bauer studied young children directly, tracking specific memories over time to see exactly when they faded. What she found was oddly precise. Most people's memories before the age of 2 vanish almost completely. Memories formed between ages 2 and 7 fade more slowly, but they still disappear at a much faster rate than memories formed later in childhood or adulthood. Bauer discovered that the cutoff isn't a wall. It's a slope. Somewhere around age 7, most children experience a sudden and sharp drop in how many early memories they can still access. By the time you became an adult, the vast majority of your first years were already gone. Why would your brain do this to you? It seems almost cruel. Wouldn't it be better to remember everything? Actually, no. And this is the twist that changes how you should think about your own missing years. A brain that remembered everything would drown in noise. Infants are absorbing an overwhelming flood of new information every single day. New faces, new sounds, new textures. If all of that got permanently filed away with equal weight, your adult mind would be cluttered with millions of disconnected fragments that serve no purpose. Instead, your developing brain did something smarter. It prioritized learning the rules of the world over remembering the specific moments you learned them in. Think about how you learned that fire is hot. You don't remember the exact afternoon you touched something warm and pulled your hand back, but you know fire is hot. That knowledge survived, even though the memory of learning it did not. Psychologists call this the difference between semantic memory, which is general knowledge about the world, and episodic memory, which is memory of specific personal events. Babies are incredible at building semantic memory. Episodic memory, the kind tied to a particular date, a particular room, a particular face, requires a fully wired hippocampus. a strong sense of self, and even language, since children often need words to anchor an experience in a way that survives retrieval years later. You couldn't hold on to isolated moments yet because you hadn't finished building the container to hold them in. There's another piece to this puzzle, and it involves something researcher Nora Newcomb and others have studied closely: the pace of forgetting itself. Young children actually forget faster than adults do, even for things that happened recently. A 2-year-old might forget an event within weeks that a 10-year-old would remember for years. This isn't a flaw. It's a feature of a brain still deciding what deserves permanent storage and what doesn't. Your earliest years were essentially a rough draft. Your brain kept revising, rewriting, discarding, until only a stable version of you remained, starting somewhere around preschool age, when memories finally began to stick with any real consistency. So the years you can't remember weren't wasted. They were the most productive years of your entire life, in terms of raw learning. You learned to recognize your mother's voice from inside the womb. You learned to walk, an act so physically complex that robotics engineers still struggle to replicate it. You learned the basic grammar of a language before you could tie your shoes. None of that required conscious memory. It required something even more fundamental: your brain quietly building the operating system that everything else would run on. Here's where it gets personal. If you have children or ever spend time around a baby, you might feel a strange sadness knowing they won't remember any of it. The trip to the beach, the lullaby, the 100 times you said, "I love you," while they drifted off to sleep. But consider what Rovee-Collier's kicking babies proved. The memory doesn't have to be conscious to matter. Every warm interaction, every soothing voice, every moment of safety is still being encoded, just not in a form that can be replayed like a video. It's being encoded as a felt sense of the world. Psychologists believe this early emotional foundation shapes attachment style, stress response, and even how safe a person feels in relationships decades later. The baby won't remember the lullaby, but something in them will remember what it felt like to be sung to. That is what you are walking around with right now. A body and a nervous system quietly shaped by thousands of moments you cannot consciously access. Somewhere in you is the echo of a voice that soothed you before you had language to describe soothing. Somewhere in you is the muscle memory of being held. You spent your first years building the foundation of everything you are. And then, once the house was finished, your mind began keeping records. That's why your first clear memory probably comes from somewhere between ages 3 and 4, right around when researchers say the hippocampus, language, and sense of self all come online together. So no, you can't remember your first birthday, but you were there. You were always the one building it.